Yeah, another draft physics video presentation. Alright, so we're probably going to do the troll again, Mickey Fartley. And it's so ironic that he has he creates image icons for his videos. And he has lemmings, jumping off a cliff. And the irony is just so huge. The duplicity of this individual, the completely backward glasses that he's wearing, where he can, and they use the claims like, he's all in the camp with the superhuman dance with, they'll just say the word unfalsifiable. And so ironic to accuse the opposition of some crime of unfalsifiability when everything speculated by physics is unfalsifiable. Entanglement, faster than light communication, dark matter, dark energy. Bent space. They're all unfalsifiable mechanisms. It's just so. You have to be so duplicitous not to realize the hypocrisy of it. How the hypocrisy is so. The magnitude is so insane. And the whole argument I'm making is that, yes, you're the lemmings. You just do what daddy tells you. Whatever the little physics professor says, you say, oh, it's the truth, and you just keep following and following. And you don't apply any scrutiny. None of you lemmings ask the question, could they be wrong? What if they just are saying something that their granddaddy told them? It's just a pile of crap. Nothing. Anything that the Bible says, you are the lemmings. Tied to your Bibles and throwing yourselves off cliffs. It's just so fucking funny that he can't see that. He can't see that that's exactly the accusation being made against you. That all I have to do is have the tiniest illusion of a piece of cheese, hanging over that cliff, and you'll go jump at it because you're so desperate. It's just, I find it hilarious. In an evil, horrible way, hilarious. Just an example of just how bad humans do logic. How they will screw the truth at every opportunity if it, in some way satisfies their need for a bullshit, some sort of little pile of crap that redeems them or says it's all okay. Some sort of comforting notion that, they're not robots stuck in a stupid fucking, mechanical system that just uses and abuses to replicate a molecule. No, they don't want to hear that story. Anyway, so yeah, I'll play some of that. But let's just understand the context. So I've, over the last couple of weeks, debunked, revealed, shown the pulled the curtain back and shown that there is no wizard involving these slit experiments. That it's just a matter of understanding the simple dynamics that can explain it. You don't need to do anything complicated to explain why there's a phenomenon. Now the simple one is the single slit, and obviously if you do that experiment in any kind of normal way, you'd understand that the light's not going to do any interference pattern. It's just straight light coming in, and even if the slit, in a sense, diffracted the light, that is, created more going this way and less this way, and some sort of bent it, didn't go through just as little pieces of straight line. There's no opportunity for any interference pattern done regularly, but we find one. We see that there is a pattern, and the middle lobe will be twice as big as these lobes, but there'll be a number of these lobes, and the number of fringes is completely dependent on just the length of the lines. So the truth is that the line from here to here and the line from here to here, this line is 2 notches. Right on the notches, they meet. Okay, their notches line up. So if they had notches on them, the notches line up. And here the notches wouldn't line up. So this one is 2 notches over, 2 wavelengths. This one's 1 wavelength over. Okay, and you just go around the circle that way, okay, the arc, because it's just this angle that's all deciding. This sine theta in the mathematics is just that angle that gets you to that point. So there's nothing at all complex in this at all, in the sense that all you're doing is measuring the difference between this line and this line. And that's it. So if this line, because this distance is 10 wavelengths longer than this line, then there'll be 10 of these nodes going in both directions. You'll have 10 little thingies. Okay. If it's only one wavelength, then you'll have this one blob and the one fringe, and that's all the pattern will be, going all the way around. So the one pattern will be very large because it has to take up the entire arc. So you always have to think that you should be viewing this as an arc. You should be viewing it in a parabola. And what would happen is that if you had just one, then yeah, the middle piece, okay, would go all the way to here, you know, then you'd have your empty space, and then you'd have the one node over here. So you'd have to project it. You'd see that, oh yeah, the node's going to be way over there. The fringe is going to be so far away you won't see it. And then if you have two wavelengths, then you know there's 3 of these things. And so now you can make them all a little bit smaller, because now this one will only take up this much space. And now you'll have room for another one here. And then you'll have room for another one here. But that's all you'll have, is 3 would fill the whole arc. And so just make it wider, you increase the number, and you can find out, you can know exactly how many bisections of the, you know, the whole 90-degree arc, you know, that you're measuring. You can know exactly how many sections you're going to break it into by just figuring out how many wavelengths are in the distances. And that's where the key comes in, is that with the double slit, you have 2 sources, so to speak, which really means 4 surfaces. So you have the distance between, you know, this line, you have this line, and you have this line, and then you have this line, and then you have this line. And each one of those has a different length. And so you can compare the difference between these two, and you can compare the difference between these two, and come up with a pattern. So, you know, in the double slit, all you're really saying is these are the 2 that have the most dramatic difference in the length, and these 2 have the least dramatic difference in their length. And those 2 composites create a pattern. You know, a pattern that one of them has a very big pattern, and one of them can have the, you know, many bars. This will be many wavelengths, 100 wavelengths, and this could be 10 wavelengths. And so the 10 wavelength will create this big pattern, and the 100 wavelengths will create the little pattern. And the theory is that the reason why this all happens is because the photons are polarized light, and the light goes through the slits, and the photons are degraded through the process. So the photons are energy, okay, coming at a frequency, little quanta at the set frequency, and they have a polarization that's proportional to the frequency. You can see that, right? Yeah. All right. And so what happens when they encounter a slit is the slit will kill some of the little bits of the photon, making the photon now too small a ray, not enough waves in it. Okay, so you can't see it anymore. And some of the bits will travel right next to the surface, and as they travel next to the surface, they're more likely to hit an electron, and they get scattered. And so what happens on the screen is that the bits of the photons from the 2 locations, plus the photons that have bits that are broken off, the parts will end up arriving at the surface, and there'll be certain locations where you'll be able to reconstruct a photon from pieces from this end, 3 pieces from this side, and then 3 pieces from this surface will realign, and you'll get a photon. But the only place they can realign is where the phase remains the same. So the pieces you're using from the two different photons have the same phase. They're on the same frequency. And that explains the whole thing pretty simply. And obviously the math is just a geometry. So you could break it down to the distance, okay? All you really want to know is the distance equals how many wavelengths. That'll tell you exactly how many bars you have. And then once you know how many bars you have, it's just doing the cut it into, divide it, by the angle. So you have 90 degrees to work with. You break the 90 degrees into how many wavelengths you have, and that'll tell you how many bars you have and how big they're going to be. So it'd be pretty easy to do mathematically. But that's it. So we have a simple explanation. And he says, we can't even consider, you're a lemming or you're an idiot or you're a moron if you even consider a simple explanation. Because we need the explanation that, number one, it doesn't even work with a single slit. Can't make it work. There's no theory for splitting the wave into two and having two waves pop out of here so they can interfere with each other. There's no rational theory for that. That's dark matter bullshit. That's just made up crap. Oh, yeah, we have an excuse to just say somehow the wave knows to break into two pieces so we can make two waves interfere with each other. So the single slit is hopelessly unexplained by their own theory with anything rational. So, and then as you progress, you go to the double slit. All of a sudden the math has to change, the variables change. So instead of the D equaling the size of the opening, the D equals the size of the middle impediment. And then they don't even have, in most of their standard math, they don't even care what the width of the other slit is. So they assume it. So they force you to only analyze the experiment with one size slit width because they assume this to be a very thin slit. Openings. Their math can't even adjust to different widths of openings. It's that bad. Their explanation is that unthought out. So anyway, that's the context. He says this is somehow impossible, somehow they've proven a classical model can't explain, blah, blah, blah. And they haven't done any of these, they haven't fulfilled any of these obligations. They'll call other people anti-scientific when all they're asking for is evidence. Show me, prove it, demonstrate it with some preponderance of the evidence. Show me how this can't work, and then show me how your thing does work. How you use the same principles when you do both experiments. I'll use the same exact principles for all of them. Multiple slits, two slits, one slit, same exact principle I'll use every time. Show me that you use the same principles, the same logic, and I'll show where that's nonsense. I'll show where, no, you change the rules for every experiment. All right. So, with that context.
Okay, so this is the very last double slit and single slit video for a while. I just want to highlight some points here. So in the previous last two videos by this guy, this clown, he said some things that are contradictory. He said some things that are...
You keep showing this as your background image, which is fraud, okay? So you pretend that this is the fair way to show slit diffraction is to put in noise waves. I mean, you can see right here, look at all this noise. You can see that these waves are completely not straight waves anymore. He says that's the right way to do it. That's the honest way to show the experiment. That shows the real physics, is to do something that's overtly against your own drawings. Clearly against the drawings of Young, who is your god of slit experiments.
Contradictory to things he said before. He said things that are just flat out denying the evidence. He said,
I've said, as previously said, it's the channel was called DraftScience for a reason, because I was drafting it. And I'm still drafting it, but it's getting solider and solider. I don't think any of this is going to change, frankly. I think this is a finished product, and I think it simply and easily debunks all the mystery you're trying to pack into this simple experiment, this foundation of your quantum mechanical woo.
Is that there's only one video or one piece of evidence that there's dark bands in the double slit pattern?
I'm saying the evidence is impossible to find, right? It's really hard to find these experiments done with any kind of meticulous care. There's a bunch of sloppy, crappy images. I mean, I can go to the Wikipedia page. I mean, I can do that. I think I have it loaded. And the images suck. I mean, this is the page on the subject. Look at this piece of crap as an image. What the hell is that, right? Now, there's no explanation. What's all this stuff down here? I mean, that shouldn't be there. That shouldn't be going right across the bottom there, this little blob of light here. It should be out here. It shouldn't be in here. So what's it doing there? Why is it there? I mean, why is this pattern so bad? So, you're saying that, I can't dispute anything you're saying. This is the truth. Your interpretation is the only interpretation, and this is the quality of your evidence. I'm just saying, obviously, your evidence sucks. I've said that from the very beginning. Okay, for 10 years I'm saying you expect me to believe your extraordinary explanations, and you give me less than ordinary evidence. Pitiful, horrible, weak, crappy evidence. And you've never refuted that statement ever with any of your nonsense, any of this evasion and bullshit. Not even close.
When I've shown about a half a dozen.
Well, anyway, so you didn't show a half a dozen of anything. The only thing that was at all compelling was the production video that I demonstrated was by a company that sells this device for $7,000 that admits it uses a filter, a noise reduction filter, and they have a professor doing their demo who's an overt Christian physics professor. I mean, there's reasons to doubt their credibility. Sorry. There's good reason for somebody who gives a shit about science not to be trusting creationists, creation scientists. They're not known for their meticulous scientific method.
Is demonstrating that there are dark bands, and he hasn't addressed any of those. The only one that he, except for...
of course I did address them. I've addressed them completely. I mean, I showed you the veritasium counter evidence. You're the one saying that's not evidence. That's all noise, even though it can't be accounted for as being all noise. Half of the bottom signal might be noise, but how do you account for the other half? So, I mean, you can just keep saying, I haven't provided an argument. Yeah, I provide a pretty good piece of evidence. Veritasium's a pretty well-respected YouTube physicist. It gets millions of views on his videos. Why, if this was so easy to show, why couldn't he show it?
He did address one of them, which was the TeachSpin website, and his response to that was that the data was being filtered, and somehow that's
It's stated right in the document. Okay, they say, and you can get our nice filter. So what do you think, they are advertising the filter and they didn't use it? Is that your argument? That 2 paragraphs below the image you showed, it says right there about the filter, and that they put that in there, but they didn't use the filter? Is that your argument? The thing they're trying to sell, they didn't use? I mean, it's a pretty ludicrous argument if that's your argument. They didn't use the filter they're advertising right in the document. Yeah, sure they didn't.
Terrible thing to him, and he's ignoring.
So they show a car with electric windows and air conditioning and all kinds of fancy features, but they don't offer the features. Please, they're not on the demo car. I mean, amazing.
The fact that the data here is in a lot of the other sources that I showed were not filtered.
So he's claiming it's not filtered. So he knows that when they did the experiment, they didn't use the filter they're trying to sell as part of the product. So the very thing they're selling as a great feature of their product that has this great filter, they didn't use it. then how can they sell it? What does it do? If they don't use it, why would they offer it if they don't use it? Can you get the logic that doesn't make any sense? They're offering a feature that is useless to them. They can't find a use for it, but they want to sell it to you, but they don't use it because it's so useless that they can't even find a purpose for it. They're doing the experiment and they can't find any use for it in the experiment, so they didn't even use it, even though they're advertising it right in their own document. Oh, okay.
Photographs, and including photographs of a single and double slit pattern right next to each other.
Yes, and I've shown those photographs, and you see a lot of bleeding in them. So, we could just keep going over these crappy images and say there's bleeding in that image. You're going to deny there's bleeding, that there's more light between the little dots. It's not a perfect black. Is that what your claim is? It's always perfectly black? Well, I can show you lots of images where it's not perfectly black between the two little bars, and so and you have no, what's your counter argument? I'm not allowed to see that it's not perfectly black.
And this is his tactic. So what he'll do is he'll say, "Well, I'm not going to accept that evidence because somehow there's a difference."
I'm saying that you're offering the claim. You're saying the thing happens where there's supposed to be, there's light, and then I open another slit and there's less light. I'm merely arguing that no, there's more light right next to it and you think there's less light, but there's really not. Now my evidence is, yes, all the photos are blurry and there seems to be light between the fringes. You're claiming there is no light there, and you can prove that, yes, with just, if I did the experiment and I'm careful, that I can do it so it's clean enough that no reasonable person could doubt your evidence. Now, I showed your evidence and I said, yes, I'm a reasonable person and I can doubt the credibility of that. Your statement is way beyond the evidence you're producing. Now, you won't admit that. That's your prerogative. I can't force you to be reasonable. You say it's overwhelming evidence that must compel. I'm saying it's uncompelling. It's certainly uncompelling evidence to sit there and say, I have to believe in your angels. I mean, I made the example, okay? You have a piece of toast with Mary's image on it, and now I have to believe in God. No, I don't. And I can be labeled reasonable and still not believe that, there's a God because Mary's image is in a piece of toast.
Between taking a single slit setup and then replacing the wall with a double slit setup versus just taking a double slit setup and closing one of the holes and then opening it again. Somehow to him that's functionally different. But
it is hugely different. I mean, when you're sliding another piece of material over the slits, you don't see the catch where there's going to be light that's going to end up going around both of those. It's going to be diffracted twice by the surface you're blocking with and blah, blah, blah. So it's hardly a perfect way of analyzing the environment. But, I mean, if that's all we have, and the smaller your slits are, the harder that task is, right? So you really should do it with pretty big slits. For, in my opinion, if you're going to attempt it, you need a pretty good, solid, large middle impediment. And then it's harder to get a good two-slit pattern. So that's the catch.
In every single one of these cases, every single one of these experiments, we see the exact same pattern.
So again, this is more of their lies, right? They just keep saying everything comes out perfect, everything in math works perfect, it's all perfect. I don't know if that's true. Exact same patterns. I just showed the Wikipedia page. You think this is the only good image of every image of the double slit experiment is this shitty? Is that your argument? They all look just like this. They're all crooked and they all have this blurry line at the bottom, and they got fringes going the up and down the other way. That's how they all look. No, they don't all look like that. Jesus. Just a horrible troll. Really. Just so
we see the same pattern, to the point where not only physicists but other physics students could make calculations and determine whether or not This pattern is...
So he's showing the double slit, and this obviously is not the pattern in the double slit, okay? I mean, the middle intensity is way down because you're blocking the middle light. So, I mean, you can't even draw the right pattern for the right slit arrangement. You know, what the hell? Not even close to the truth, fella. You know, I mean, it's a big difference when you're shining a light and I have the impediment right in front of the light. You can't understand that, right? That I'm blocking the strongest light coming from the source when I put my hand in there, right? Like, say if my head was the flashlight, you know, I could put 2 fingers here, right in the middle. I'm blocking the most intense light from the flashlight, and all you're getting is these, you know, fringes, the side lights. Big difference from when you do this, right? And only the only the light from the middle of the flashlight's going through. Yeah, those are completely different experiments, I would argue.
Is the exact same pattern from experiment to experiment. Okay, and if it wasn't...
All right, so again, more just that you must believe, because we all believe, and even though the evidence is weak and fuzzy and blurry, you have to believe, and if you don't believe, I'm going to call you a science denier and crucify you wherever way I can. I'll you know, invade your life, do all kinds of other antics, you know, because you're an evil person, because you don't believe in our Bible.
Somebody would have noticed that over the, I don't know, 200 years that this experiment has been known about.
You would think that somebody would have cared to get the story right. And it's pretty sad commentary, right? That I can play all these clips of very famous Nobel Prize winning professors who explain it wrong. Overtly wrong. I mean, it's just really badly drawn, badly explained. None of what I just showed here on this blackboard, they don't tell you anything about this fact that there's a certain number of these fringes. There's a limited number. They don't go on forever. And the ones that if you did project them on a straight line, they get distorted preposterously. Something this big ends up being 5 miles long at these bizarre angles. And that the only rational way to understand the experiment is that there's a 9 degrees of angle that the light can scatter at, and that the entire pattern fits in that 9 degrees. And so it can be understood that, yes, there's a certain number of fringes, a certain number of notches on the ruler. And if the two lines are, one ruler is a lot longer, one's a 2-foot ruler and one's only a 1-foot ruler, and you're moving those around, you know, they're both the same size here and they change as they go, you understand that the notches can line up. Not hard to figure out.
And the hundreds of thousands of physics students who have performed the experiment over the years. Okay, but none of that really matters because...
Yeah, no, they've done it in a lemming fashion. They've performed the experiment with the whole wooey story told. You know, like I said, I can present the Mary on the toast in a way that just makes it undeniable, right? I can spend some money and do a Shroud of Turin video and just make it, oh, how can I not believe? I mean, look, it's just so clear that, yeah, that's Jesus, and Jesus was 10 feet tall. I mean, damn, it's so obvious.
Like I said before, even if we grant, and there's no reason why I should have to grant this, there's no reason why I would need to, but even if we granted that in the double slit pattern we have a pattern...
You know what would be great is if you just granted your evidence sucks, okay, and you don't care. That would be the part I'd like to hear you concede. You just don't care how sucky your evidence is because you want the conclusion. And you just, you don't care if the dots don't add up to that conclusion. You don't care. You're just going to put your dots wherever you want your dots because you want your dots to point to God.
Like this. Oh, actually, let me go ahead and do it like this. So if we grant that the double slit pattern looks like this, okay.
Right, something I'm not going to grant just because, yes, obviously there's less light that goes at these higher angles. It's less and less likely light is going to be diffracted at the further you're diffracting the light, the less photons are going there, so it gets weaker. But the theory of the fringe doesn't get any weaker, and the fringes don't get any bigger, and they're all the same size little notches filling the thing up.
And then we have some fringes over here. If we grant that the doubles, or just to be fair, let's say it goes dark over here. That's kind of irrelevant. And we grant.
See, he says it's kind of irrelevant, but it really isn't, because it really the mathematics, the geometry says no. The only thing, yes, it gets darker. The pattern won't be visible, but it's still there, and it's still part of the entire math that makes the pattern in the first place. And it's just about how many wavelengths of difference you create by how far the surfaces are from each other. These are clearly vectors coming off the surfaces. Those are the point sources, the surfaces. There's 4 point sources in the double slit. There's 2 point sources in the single slit. And the point sources are the surfaces. And that's what the evidence is indicating. And you just won't even consider it. You won't consider it as a possibility. You won't consider that they drew the wrong conclusion. That the point sources are some sort of wave centers. That's not the point sources. The point sources are the surfaces.
The single slit patterns from both slits, the right and the left, sum to a value less than the dark bands in the double slit.
So again, he says it again. So he just keeps asserting that somehow this dark, if this was the double slit, okay, goes all the way down here. And so there's light when this one slit is open, and it goes to dark when 2 slits are open. So he keeps asserting it, and somehow the evidence indicates it. And I'm saying that evidence, in my opinion, is way too weak for conclusion. It's an extraordinary claim, and you're saying, here's less than ordinary evidence, and I'm going to force you to accept it.
Okay, so we have the left hand and the right hand, and let's say they're just right on top of each other, more or less.
Well, let's say it because it's the truth. Okay, there's a less than a millimeter, a half millimeter distance difference between the two, and you're projecting it. Doesn't matter how far I project it. I can project it on the moon, and there still should only be a millimeter of difference. So the point is those 2 patterns do have to be on top of each other, because there's no way, once you make it a foot, in size, once I make that thing by, going distance and making it, enlarging it, once I enlarge it to a foot, the millimeter is gone. You can't see the millimeter of difference anymore. So that's the truth. So all the physicists keep drawing it sloppy and stupid because the two wouldn't be in different locations. They would be in essentially the same location, 1/2 millimeter out of being right on top of each other. You don't think these are important details? I do.
Even if we granted that, and again, I'm saying there's no good reason to do that.
There's the good reason is there's only a millimeter of difference, and there's no reason why the 2 patterns should be moving anywhere. Because one slit is here and one slit is here does not mean the light automatically is going that way. That somehow they're bisecting the flashlight. That's not what's supposed to be happening. So the separation between the 2 slits should be replicated at a distance. Now, obviously you have some spread in the laser and all that kind of stuff, so it'll get a little bit bigger, but I'm still saying it's a 1 millimeter difference. That's all there should be. And projected on a screen some meters away, that 1 millimeter will be quite irrelevant. It'll be impossible to detect.
Okay. And this is our double slit. If we, whether you want to close one of the slits or whether you want to pick this entire apparatus up and replace it with a...
So he's just arguing the same exact argument all over again. We've seen that the evidence sucks. And you're just going to keep saying that, no, I proved it, and so here's another stupid illustration of the same nonsense. Draw this on top of Veritasium's images. And show me how this makes sense on top of his images, which you're going to argue.
Single slit. In both cases, if we close this one, what is the pattern that we're going to see? Well, we're going to see, this whole pattern is going to go away, and we're just going to see that pattern. Okay, but then if we were to open this slit and then cover this slit, would we see the same pattern? Because now all of this light that was coming through the left-hand slit is now blocked. So now we need to, take this, and you can imagine taking this line here, this curved line, and stretching it out. Okay, so then this becomes a stretched out line, like this.
They're both going to make small lines, in theory. So let's just say there's no fringes, okay? Here, I'll try to simplify your simplification with something a little more rational, a little more thoughtful and sensible and all that kind of crap. So what he's trying to illustrate, apparently, I mean, I haven't watched it, so I don't know. But so what he's attempting to illustrate is that when you have two slits here, okay, and you're shining the light through, and here's your surface you're going to view it on. If I cover one slit, and we just say there's no such thing as fringes and notches and whatever. There's just light that's going to be diffracted. Well, then we know that one slit would do this. All right, the light would spread out into the location and fill it. See, this is only 1 millimeter of distance here, right? So you can't never draw it to scale, right? It'll never look right when you draw it because you have to make this big, right? I have to make the slits the size of a dot, and so obviously you're not going to get it. But this light is coming to the same center. Both of these are centered essentially on this spot by only a 0.5 millimeter difference. So anyway, so one slit makes that, and then the other slit makes this, right? The point would be is that's a doubling here, right? So you could understand that these two would have to be on top of each other, and you'd get this as your final result. Now, what we get isn't this, but it's, you know, it's this doubling idea, all right, except, okay, the doubling goes all the way to 0, is the argument. Right, so I didn't draw that perfectly, but you get the idea. All right, so there's all these zeros that happen. So where one slit made light here and a second slit made light here, there's now 0 photons getting there. Now what I'm arguing is the evidence doesn't show that. What it does show is that there is a tremendous amount of bleeding, okay, between these spots, and there's a bunch of photons that are still getting here, which indicates that is the slits, okay, the light from the original photons that would go from one location from, you know, all these different spots and stuff, and that the pattern is added light. So the light is added on top of that pattern, because now you have 4 sources, and the 4 sources amplify the amount of parts you can put together. Each source is providing A, B, C's, you know, in different amounts, and what you're trying to do is put an A, B, C together, or an A, B or a C, D. Those two will make photons, let's say. So you're just trying to put parts here. So as you throw more places, more sources of parts, you end up being able to put together more photons. So the more sources, the more you can get them all in phase and make more complete photons. But you never undo what's here. You just add 4 times more in the bright spots. The bright spots get brighter. The dark spots don't get darker. I mean, the light spots don't get unlight.
We're still getting dark bands and bright bands, okay, differences between the peaks and troughs here, that we do not get anytime we do this single slit experiment with a fixed width, with a fixed width equal to the width of this slit. Okay.
So that's absolute nonsense. So if you do use the same size slits, you'll get more pattern. So that's just nonsense. So if you cover one of the slits, you'll get a pattern if you have a slit opening that's wide enough. So it doesn't matter. You have 2 slits and you covered one of them, you'll get the same pattern you'd get with a single slit of the same size. So that's just absolute nonsense. You won't get a straight line when I do a single slit here and I get a pattern. I can't use the same size slit in a double slit and cover one of them and get a different pattern. I'll get exactly the same pattern I got in a single slit. So he has no evidence for this assertion.
Okay, so let's say this is equal to width W, and this slit is equal to width W. Okay, in the case of this slit, we should not get bright and dark bands. Okay, but and in fact, in reality, we don't.
Okay, so that's just nonsense.
Okay.
He's wrong. He has no evidence of that ever being the truth. It's just every time they do the double slit experiment and cover one of the slits, they're always using very, very, very small slits. So there's no pattern because there's one big blob, because the smaller the slit, the wider the pattern. So again, the fewer nodes So, but if you use a big enough slit, you get plenty of pattern. Plenty of single slit pattern. So he's saying that this goes away. Let's do this one more time. You really shouldn't have to keep doing it over and over, but this is the fact that they never deal with any of the arguments really made. They just keep arguing selectively what they want to argue. They don't argue the actual argument actually being made. So this is the single slit pattern. Now if I use exactly this same size slit that was used for this pattern, and I make two of them, double slit, this is exactly what I'll get when I cover one of the slits. I'll still get this single slit pattern. He's asserting that I'll get a blob. No, won't happen. Won't happen. It's just nonsense.
So, I mean, this is, I don't understand how, I mean, let's go to this video, actually. Okay, so this piece of shit video has 12 thumbs up, and Zohar Kohavi, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a moron.
Hey guys, so we're going to be talking about some really hard science in this video.
Writing positive comments. I mean, there's actually several morons who don't understand this. Okay, it doesn't. So, like I said, and you cavalierly just, ignored the fact that I granted you could, for the sake of argument, assume that the single slit pattern looks like this, and the dark bands in the double slit pattern are less than the points in the single slit.
So again, the argument clearly is that's not what the single slit uses unless you have a very small number of wavelength width slit. So unless you're talking about a slit width of 1 micrometer, let's see, 1 micrometer, that would give you 2 fringes. So, what's the argument? If I have a slit that's that's 0.4 of a millimeter, there's going to be lots of pattern here. This blue line is going to have lots of pattern in it.
Setup. Okay, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was willing to grant this, and it still doesn't make sense logically. And it doesn't. I assume, I'm just going to presume anyone sane would agree with that. But again, it's because I'm not playing, dramatic music over it.
Oh, so if that's what he's going to do, yeah, that'll be the end of this video. So, I mean, obviously I don't have any music in my video, so I don't know what that means.
So let's see. So I mean, if I played dramatic music over it, maybe people would understand it better. So.
So again, more insane duplicity. He's complaining that I got 12 ups on a video, and I have some people who watch my videos, and he's complaining somehow it's too many. And they're here for the music, apparently. So I didn't realize the background music is what's compelling you here. Oh yeah, I don't even hear it. Amazing. Yeah. Must be a quantum thing, I'm too close to the music, so therefore I can't hear it. Some kind of bullshit.
Let's see.
So he's going to all this trouble to make horrible noises. So let's just jump ahead and see.
The truth.
There.
And you can look here at this.
All right. Obviously, I'm not going to waste my time with that.
2 eyes, is it? But yet, when we zoom in the image, we do see the dark bands get lighter.
Okay, so again, we don't. We don't see the light bands get twice as bright. So clearly, I demonstrated that you don't see any of these getting brighter. So how can the other side be getting brighter and you can't see it, and then you claim the middle's getting darker? Well, obviously, if your camera... Oh, okay. Let's bring that up, right? I think they claim that.
And if we zoom all the way in, we see the actual pixels get bright.
We actually see, but 4 times brighter over here. So again, this is what he's saying is just too compelling an evidence. This blurry pile of shit is his compelling evidence.
These pixels are changing in intensity. I mean, if that's not your...
That looked brighter when this was darker, right? Brighter when darker. Brighter when darker.
Irrefutable evidence of something, nothing is. There's nothing you'll accept as real. nothing.
Okay, so there's no point, right? He's playing music over crap to say, he's saying you're denying science and truth and evolution. This is such a great fossil. This is such a great piece of evidence. This is clearly dark here. It's clearly a dark band. Okay, so there's just no point. So I'll play a little clip of the MIT video, right, that he played, and we'll go to like 4 minutes or so for something. I'll play it from there maybe.
And then you get a lot more little side lobes in between. So as I widen the spacing between the jaws, you can see that those 3 lobes will get narrower and narrower. And of course you'll see the ones from these other side lobes also. There's little dots to the side.
Now what he's getting here is obviously part of it is because he's using 2 razor blades, he's creating another 2 surfaces. So that's why he has these dots in the center that are brighter. They're actually not what you'll really get when you have a diffraction gradient.
Now the intensity is so bright that it's saturating our camera. So
okay, I just wanted to point out that he's aware of the concept. It's a little bit of a problem with cameras that yes, they can their capacity to, what you're seeing is going to get distorted based on whether the camera has to change the exposure to get an image, to maintain an image. And so I just wanted to play that because it's clearly right there as a statement by the guy making the video. So, these people then they'll say, oh, he's claiming saturation. Well, he's claiming, yes, legitimately claiming that you have to be kind of careful how you're recording the evidence. LOL, so he is using filtering as an excuse now. So again, all I can say is why would they put the filter option a paragraph, 2 paragraphs below the image when they don't use it and they're selling it? So they announce how it's a great feature, the filter, but they didn't use the filter. I think that's hilarious, if that's what you think I should believe. Okay, brace yourself, you're an idiot. It just never ends. Yeah, right. Okay, let's see what old Mickey had to say. He doesn't even understand how the filtering works. His explanation for filtering is if 2 photons arrive too close together in time, the filter decides to ignore one of them. No, it ignores both of them, idiot. So you don't even get that part. Okay, rather than the mechanism described in the paper. Well, that's what's described in the paper, retard. Time-sensitive filtering. So you're a dumbass. All right. So we'll jump ahead, see if there's anything else in here.
Why don't you argue the argument?
Oh, he stops playing music. Now, what the fuck would some idiot do that for? Play music and then stop playing the dopey music. I mean, he's so irrational.
Pattern. Okay, and I'm granting, again, like I said, I'm going to grant, even though this is a completely unwarranted grant, no reason for me to do this, that the single slit pattern has this level of intensity, and the double slit pattern looks like this. I'm willing to grant that. Whatever, okay? There's a difference between here and here. I'm granting it, you assholes. I'm granting it. Okay, that still means that if you cover one slit here, that this green pattern goes away and you get this pattern. But then, if you open this one and then close the other one, then this whole thing goes away, and then our new 0 is here, and you should get a wavy pattern like this, which is not what we see. Okay.
All right, that made no sense, right? He's saying there's the bulge pattern when one is covered, and then there's a wavy pattern when the other one's covered. They're 2 equal slits. How could that be possible? No, the 2 slits, cover one, you get a pattern. Cover the other one, you get the same exact pattern. It's not 2 different patterns. And clearly the whole point is the sources. When one is covered, all you have are two very close to each other sources. When the other one's covered, you have two very close to each other sources. Obviously, when you open both of them, you have two sources now that are very far apart, because they're the entire, not only the distance of the slits combined, but they're also the distance of the impediment added to that distance. So now these two outside slits become very far apart. Duh. Duh. And now the middle impediment also becomes the other distance point source, right? So, I mean, it does change the point sources in the sense that the shortest distance is now this distance.
That's the argument, shithead. Why don't you argue the argument, shithead?
Whatever.
Let me get the music back.
Oh, so, I mean, yeah. So that makes sense. Music on, music off.
With evidence. And it's not just... The reason I was showing the teach spin videos is because these apparatuses are things that can be purchased by universities, and therefore these experiments are performed thousands of times every year.
Okay, so he says this is happening thousands of times, that they sold, he knows they sold thousands of those $7,000 pieces of shit, all over the country, and that all these experiments are being done, and nobody knows how to use a video camera, nobody can film any of it. That's the argument. Nobody can film anything. They can't make a video. That's way too technically involved. It's really impossible, right? I mean, it's only geniuses like me that can make thousands of videos, hours and hours of video. No, regular scientists can't do that. They're too stupid to figure out how to turn put their iPhone on, take a video of the experiment. Yeah, too complicated. Yeah, right. Obviously, the experiment is being done casually all over the place, and that's all they do. They do it casually. Nobody does it with any kind of technical precision.
By university students around the world, and they're taking data every single time, and they're comparing that with the theoretical results that you would get from Huygens principle, and they're seeing that it fits, and it fits.
Okay, so and I showed you the counter evidence produced by Veritasium. So you said Veritasium had some reason not to show it the way that proves quantum mechanics. He was just too stupid to show it so it proves quantum mechanics. It proves the mystery. So he's just incompetent. He can't do it. He's too dumb. That's your argument. But he did the experiment really badly. All right, fine. I still haven't seen you show me somebody doing it well, except for a Christian physicist. He's the one who does it right.
Together, like pieces of a puzzle. And it fits together consistently every time. It's not just
okay, so there's no point. I mean, this insane exaggeration. I point out how the evidence is fuzzy, weak, blurry, shitty. Again, let's go back to the Wikipedia page. This is their image. Okay, the Wikipedia page can't put a better piece of shit up than this crap. All right, and the rest is what? Simulations, right? All right, so this is a little better. All right. But here's the comparison. It's perfectly consistent with my theory. Clearly lots of bleeding in here. These aren't clear dark lines. There's lots of photons in between those bands there. Lots of photons. The electron experiment, lots of error photons for whatever reason. And again, we don't have a whole bunch of this electron experiment stuff. Obviously we're not seeing the double slit pattern here at all. We're just seeing 5 bands. They can't even photograph more than that. Drawings, useless. Yeah, pretty much. Synthetics, dopey little animations, right? I mean, the animation does have plane waves going in, so that's all wrong. They should have jiggly lines going in, because that's the way you're supposed to do the experiment, with jiggly lines going in. Again, another not outstanding image. Drawings, right? Simulations. This is what it looks like on our computer software. That's not how it looks in real life, right? All this gradual on and off. The real pattern doesn't look anything like that. So just fake bullshit, abstractions. So that's the best you can do. That's your physics. You know, I mean, it's a fair place to go to say, what do they got? What's the evidence? So you go see what the evidence is, and a reasonable person would say, well, that's pretty suck-ass evidence. You want me to believe a whole Jesus theory? And, you know, this is toast. This is toast with Nixon on it. You know, I have to believe because there's a piece of toast with Richard Nixon's picture on it. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid and bad.
Like, oh, it kind of looks like, no, they're actually doing calculations. And it would be crazy to say that these calculations are...
yeah, so again, and we've already had these arguments about what formula is the right formula. I've just pointed out, okay, the beginning of this video clearly just illustrates how simple this is. Just has to do with how far away the point sources are, and you can do all the calculations. You can figure out exactly how many bands there actually are in space. And you can do so much more just by understanding the simple concept. That this is just about straight line vectors caused by scatter.
Happening just by chance, or it's some kind of a massive conspiracy.
No, it's the same sickness you have. The human race is duplicitous and lousy. Human beings suck. They're always looking for their advantage, always looking for something that covers them. They're always trying to force reality to match their delusions and the things that make them look like they're winners and not the losers that they actually are. They're always looking for rationalizations and excuses to throw their mothers in nursing homes or whatever the thing they have to do is. You know, the cat's eating garbage. They'll just make excuses and make it's all right. I'll rationalize the circle of life bullshit. It's all acceptable. It doesn't matter what the fuck happens. They'll find a rationalization. And clearly the lemming image that you projected on your video describes you perfectly. You're all just compulsively gang-oriented, mob-oriented. You know, you can never concede. Somebody else might make a better argument. You have to always win, even when you've clearly lost. And so, yeah, you're a display of the character, the bad character. You don't care about the scientific method. You don't care about redundantly doing these experiments and proving them. You don't care about the quality of the evidence. You'll show a distortion, overt distortion as your background image on your own videos. An overt distortion of perspective. You've distorted the waves going in for the very purpose of creating some validation when you know that can't be the right way to do it. You can't change the conditions of the experiment and then say, oh, I did a properly controlled experiment. I mean, you're the one who overtly hates science and hates the principles that are involved in a fair argument. You're a shyster lawyer, and it's that clear. You don't give a fuck about the truth. You're there to defend your guilty client, and that's it. You don't care about ethics. You don't care about playing fair. You're just going to throw race cards or whatever other kind of card you can throw to get your truth validated. You just don't fucking care about the truth. And you make it obvious and clear in the whole way you present this crap argument.
And let's actually go to my bookmarks. It's coherent light required. I don't know what this. Oh yeah. So okay.
Doo-dee-doo-dah. Hooey. Synthetic.
Okay, well, we can go here. We can look at Wiley Online Library, and we can type in diffraction.
So he's still arguing that the normal diffraction pattern for a single slit, okay, is, noise. That's the normal diffraction pattern. So if I have a single slit, my expectation, what I should always understand is the real truth, okay, is that you have a single slit and you put some water through it, little waves come in, and I should always understand that noise comes out, okay, that the pattern does this, okay. It does not, as a fact, do this. This is not the normal pattern for a wave going through a slit. This is the bizarre, aberrant. This is the perversion of the truth. To draw it like this, okay, without any of this crap, that's perverting the truth. That's lying. That's not the truth. Plain ocean waves, if they went into a little inlet, they won't create these nice round waves. No, 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 no. That will not happen. They will do this, and they'll do this, and they'll do this. It's just so pathetic.
All right, and now you can see thousands of articles. Well, maybe not. Yeah, I mean, there are thousands of articles. And a lot of them are free. Like, you can...
Yes, I know, it's free. You can watch Professor Lewin say right to your face, okay, this isn't a diffraction pattern. It's an interference pattern in a single slit. So Professor Lewin's an idiot, right? He's wrong. He's a liar. He's a cheater. He's faking the physics. He's distorting people's perspective by lying about what diffraction is.
Actually go in and access them for free. Are all of these people lying, or are they just faking? Because according to DraftScience...
Yeah, according to DraftScience, he's just pointing out how every single one of them can't describe their foundational experiment accurately. And we're supposed to believe everything they say. Everything they say has huge credibility and is just should be gigantically meaningful to me. So every time they say dark matter and LIGO, gravity waves and Einstein rings and all this stuff, I should believe every bit of it. And I shouldn't analyze any of it. I shouldn't find obvious flaws in the lensing images where the same image is reversed over here. No, I shouldn't ask any questions. Shouldn't apply any scrutiny at all, because the gods have said so, and they've shown how they're so perfect. You know, they never make these egregious mistakes. It never happens. Even though I can show them directly contradicting each other, I can show them drawing something simple wrong. But I should believe them.
You know, the theoretical predictions don't match what we see in reality. He's made that very, very clear in all of his videos.
I made it clear that there's no theory for measuring 1/10,000th of a proton's distance with a photon. Photons can't do that. Not photons bouncing off mirrors. It's impossible for a photon to tell you that information when you can't predict how deep the photon is going to go into the mirror. So it doesn't make any logical sense. The photon will bounce irregularly the distance of an atom, at least an atom, more like 5 or 6, every single time it hits a fucking mirror. It's going to bounce irregularly. How can you say that after I've done that 1,600 times, I can now measure 1/10,000th of a proton, when you can't even be sure your photon, your length of time hasn't been completely changed by the fact that it went deeper into the mirror one time than it went into the mirror the other time? You can't be exact about where it reflected. The point it reflected is moving. How can you say you can measure 1/10,000th of the distance of a proton with a line that's moving whole atoms at a time?
So, if they're able to do all of this research and manufacture disk readers and make lasers that work...
Okay, so again, all of this crap about how they made... We know how long it took to make a blue laser. 27 years or whatever it was. It wasn't theory that did it, okay? It was experiments that did it. We know all this stuff comes out of fiddling with things and trying to make it work. And theory doesn't have much to do with it, frankly. It has very little to do with the improvements that are made.
Diffraction techniques in structural biology. So are the biologists in on this too?
Well, clearly there are biologists who are full of the woo, you know, quantum wooey life force nonsense. So yeah, anybody can be a religious kook. There's no law against it. I mean, I think there should be. Okay, you're not allowed to be a religious kook and a scientist, because your logical skills are so bad. You shouldn't be allowed to be a scientist. I mean, frankly, it's just so illogical, God. It's just such an illogical theory. Why would I let somebody like that theorize about anything else?
This big conspiracy to hide the shape of the diffraction pattern. Grazing is the...
So again, it's not hiding it, it's just showing their ignorance. They never cared to really look at it. Like lemmings, they just accepted the story. Okay, I don't care about the details. Let's just get to the next part of the book. So the first book of the first chapter says all the houses are made out of gingerbread and, lollipops grow out of the ground. Okay, they accepted that. And so, now their version of reality is going to be dependent on gingerbread and lollipops. Because they never analyzed it to say, well, wait a minute, in that first chapter where you said there's gingerbread and lollipops, what if that's not true? It's grass and dirt and rocks and mud and sticks and trees and that kind of stuff.
Optical diffraction, military laser technology for defense. So this is and a lot of some of these you have to pay for because some people actually have to earn a living. They don't have a free pass. Like some.
Right. Science should be that way. Science should be some racket where you have to publish in a magazine and, they have to have this whole mechanism. I don't think science should be that way, frankly.
Some people have to actually work for a living. Can you imagine that? Diffraction.
Yeah, I wonder what you do for a living. Government employee, no doubt.
Blah, blah, blah. Energy filter diffraction. I mean, I want to get one that's like, you can read it online.
Yeah, you want to get one.
Neutron diffraction. So if the diffraction pattern was only due to photons bumping into electrons, well, how come neutron?
Right. So they can't draw the single slit with light, right? They can't explain it correctly, and yet you're going to trust them saying, I shot a neutron somewhere. Yeah. See, neutrons are really hard to shoot anywhere. Neutrons are hard to collect, and then they're really hard to push anywhere. So, I mean, the fact that you're saying you shoved neutrons through two slits, I find that almost like, yeah, I can just laugh at that, right? Sure you did.
Neutrons have a diffraction pattern, too. Okay, let's go to photon interference. We can look at that. Theory of photon interference.
You could have done this ahead of time. I mean,
temporarily correlated narrowband biphoton interference based on Mach Zehnder interferometer. These are all original works.
Yes, and I've already demonstrated how the interferometer makes no sense. So he hasn't dealt with any of those beam splitter arguments. How does the beam splitter create two equal beams? Show me. Draw it for me. Draw me the beam splitter creating two equal beams. Do that. Show me the mechanics of it. How the photons create two, they're separated into two paths by the beam splitter completely benignly. Yeah.
And they've been, scientists are replicating these experiments over and over again. And they're showing that waves have...
So, some more just hyperbole. He just keeps saying it. Let's exaggerate the fuck out of everything. Let's just talk about how it's really great stuff. I'll just go back to the Wikipedia page and we'll say, yeah, this is the best they can do. This is their compelling evidence. Oh, yeah, that's just too compelling, that. Yeah, that just convinces me entirely. Oh, I love these synthetic images. Look, when we do just what the math says, this is what it looks like. Does it ever look like that in the reality? No. Just obvious disconnect. Our math is perfect at making, synthetics. Doesn't really match reality much, but yeah, that's okay. Who needs reality? You just sit here and you just marvel at, wow, humans suck so bad. They just suck so bad. All right, I don't know what the same point playing the rest of this shit.
Interference patterns. New light. Yeah.
Let's see what he wraps
you guys can
with.
do this on your own. Like
right.
Exhibit interference behavior.
Yeah, right. You can do this on your own. I've done it on my own. It's really not there. So he says all this evidence is there. It's available. Blah blah blah. You have to go back to videos from 1950 to get some good demonstration videos. Right? You have to go all the way back to the 50s to get where they actually recorded an experiment. That's how bad the physics is.
And demonstrate interference fringes. Okay, so are all of these people lying, or are all these scientists just on a big conspiracy?
So just more crap, right? I'm arguing it's not interference. I'm arguing that it's, photon destruction and reconstruction. And by the way, as I should have pointed out, this theory works for explaining polarized light filters. It explains why the three filter phenomenon creates more light. Their theory doesn't.
Conspiracy theory to hide the shape of the diffraction pattern, or what?
Clearly, you jumping the evidence, okay? Not giving shit about the scientific process and actually being able to support your conclusions. That's the accusation being made. You will jump to a conclusion without necessary supporting evidence. That's the clear accusation. Weak evidence, strong assertions. That's what you're guilty of. That's my primary accusation against you, is that you will jump the evidence to get to your conclusion. You'll quote mine it, you'll distort it, you'll pervert it in any way you can to support your theory, and you will ignore all the flaws, especially like with gravitational lensing arguments. Tremendous flaws in the reasoning. They ignore all of it. All the dots that don't connect to God, you will ignore, okay? Because those are evolution dots, and you're not interested in the truth. And it's that simple. All right, well, let's go to this other video. Maybe I'll play it in the future. I don't know. He's doing the fucking website again. I've stated overtly in the videos, right? The videos are linked. You know, eventually I update them. So, yeah, they'll be a little bit behind a couple of weeks at a time sometimes. But anyway, they're updated eventually. And I've stated it's behind the videos, okay? I haven't gotten, I'm one man. I'm supposed to do all this stuff. Yeah, frankly, no, it ain't going to happen. So it's a little bit behind. But there's nothing wrong with the first few paragraphs. So, yeah, it's okay. All the way to the left turn stuff, and then the magnetism thing. Like I say, the image is good, but some of the reasoning, I still had some reason to think gravity was some different function. So, but he's so selective. I'll sit there and take the old parts, the archaic parts, the parts you've changed, and I'll argue those again. Why would you do that? Especially to a channel called Draft Physics that's attempting, to, I started from nothing and I've got something. And you think the thing to do is to argue where, it wasn't as mature and as developed. Why would you do that? Why would you go back in time and argue with my fetus? It's kind of silly. Oh, you would do that because you don't care about the truth. You don't care about defeating my argument as it really is. You just want to sit there and argue it as it was, because that's easier. And so you're just a coward, clearly. Oh, yeah, what I wanted to do was comments. Yeah, see, there was some stupid comments on this video.
Okay. Oh, wait, I need to do my pen. Hang on.
Oh, I need my pen. Yeah, hang on.
That's better.
Pretty hard to imagine that he actually has a tablet and he draws so poorly.
Okay, DraftScience presents Physics the Do-Over. It's the Photon Stupid. So you thought I was joking when I kept titling my videos, It's the Photon Stupid. Well, right here you have it. This is actually...
Yeah, the point is that it's the speed of force. Photons are a force. So everything can be considered sort of photonic. All the forces are behaving as if quantas of energy moving. And so, yes, it could all be understood that all force is, in one way or another, a kind of photon. All right, well, anyway, I've already been over all that. So we'll do this one some other time. I'll just do some of these comments. He says his theory isn't a Bigfoot theory, but it absolutely is. So it's Bigfoot to argue there's a certain number of these little fringes based on the width of this slit and the number of wavelengths in here, and it's two different vector lines, and that's why there's a pattern. That's Sasquatch. Okay. It's totally incoherent and illogical, so vacuous mush, and has no connection to reality, except it explains it simply, and it unifies all of physics. Okay. Hell, you can at least imagine a world with Bigfoot existing. So, you can. But I can't imagine a world where this theory makes any sense. So he just can't imagine. It's 2 + 2 + 2 physics. we know that the only thing that makes the universe work at all is the idea that there has to be two different kind of actions. For electrons and protons to manifest charge, there has to be some reason why the proton and the electron can detect the world and say, I'm doing something different. And the real difference just has to do with momentum hitting something, and the something moves in the direction, the same dimension as the momentum moves. And the catch is the universe also can do a thing where the momentum hits and it changes the momentum into one of the other two dimensions, the other four-dimensional choices. You know, if you say 6 dimensions, you know, right, left, up, down, forward, back. And that little change, okay, that simple little fucking change, you could argue, is where all the difference in the universe happens. Something moves in one of these two dimensions instead of staying in this dimension. So the fact that momentum could be converted dimensionally, that you can change its momentum from this to this, or this, or this, or this. That's all you need to explain the change in the universe. He says that's impossible. Oh, I can't consider that. Yeah. He's such an asshole. And he has a little wooey nebula, yeah, little images, the little synthetic images from space, the ones that have been highly processed for human comfort. Wow, this page is definitely Time Cube-esque. Education fish twans brilliant, you think stupid. Why worship the dumb quantum god when I demonstrate four simultaneously perpendicular relations with a single Twan field? I don't even know what that means, so it's obviously not a quote of anything. Don't they both offer $10,000 to debate a physicist? I don't know what both are. And not 10,000, no. Gary might be the second coming of Jean Ray, whatever that is. So, but regardless, the fact that I have offered thousands of dollars for a named physicist, I'll pay him thousands of dollars. I will pay that. Okay, so if Kaku or Degrassi Tyson or Sean Carroll wants to grow a testicle, I mean, I will pay them appearance money. The same kind of money they get to appear at other places. I'll pay them to appear here. All right, but they won't do it. I've sent them the offers, and they will not do it. Okay, because they're cowards, because their reputation is going to be tarnished, because they can't answer any of these questions. Okay. No point. I'm not reading your comments anymore, no point. You're just so full of shit. I mean, what the fuck is this? I mean, it's a good thing it's his video, because I would have just blocked you instantly. I mean, 7 comments, 8 comments on one fucking video? Yeah, he's just gotten too annoying. Okay. Has Gary ever effectively addressed the drag issue? I think I effectively explained a mechanism. So he's mocking the mechanism, and you're saying, okay, so this is more of their, complete hatred of science. You have to hate science to sit there and be obnoxious to this simple theoretical thought experiment. I mean, it's a thought experiment, right? Because we can't create all these frictionless environments with subatomic particles. But we probably could create it, the little, like air cushions, and you could do different things. So I'm sure it could be illustrated to some extent. But, this simple idea that if I threw energy into something and the energy bounced fairly efficiently, off the surface, okay, and it would keep bouncing. And you can understand it was frictionless, so it never stopped bouncing. You could sort of understand that this cart would have an initial momentum created by that first impact, right? So he's saying this theory has no reason to even consider it. It's so nonsensical, all right? So the initial impact is in this direction. And then when the thing's bouncing this way, the cart's rolling this way, right? Okay, so the thing inside is going this way. The bit that's bounced off a spring here, right? We can just put a spring here and it bounces off the spring. Well, we know some of the energy goes into the cart, but in a frictionless world, you don't lose any energy. So anyway, but just the idea, okay, so it goes in one way. The initial momentum goes in one way. The cart rolls. the reflection is going the opposite way. When it hits the back wall, the cart's going to stop. The cart's not going to go that way. It's just going to stop. The momentum it had going this way is going to be canceled by hitting the back wall. So now the cart just stops. It doesn't go backwards. It just stops. Right? But what happens when it stopped? Oh, that's right. The momentum's now going back forward. And when it hits this front surface, it's going to go again. And then it's going to stop. And then it's going to go again. All right. So he's arguing that doesn't explain how you could overcome drag. Because obviously as this energy gets more increased, what would happen is, essentially the cart would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and the energy inside would get stronger and stronger because the impacts between the two surfaces would happen even more often. And so he says it doesn't address the drag issue. I think it does address it with a possible explanation, a viable explanation. He says it's somehow overtly unviable, and he won't even consider why it's unviable. All right, anyway, let's see. The drag issue. No, I don't mean wearing women's clothes. Ha ha ha. I see several attempts, but it seems really strained. So he says that's a strained effort to explain why in the universe there's no drag for some objects. Because there's a mechanism inside that's compensating. I mean, I could also compensate for it by just explaining again electrons and protons, right? So if electrons and protons actually are doing this dimensional change, okay, so if I have an electron and a proton, and then I put another electron in the picture, over here, let's say, you could understand that if the energy reflects off the electrons and is diverted, okay, by the proton, that is, there's the two reactions, right? You can reflect off of something, or the energy can be in this dimension. So something hits and the reflection doesn't come back this way, the reflection goes this way and the momentum goes this way. So instead of the momentum going this way and the reflection going this way, you can see that, right? Yeah. All right, so with that simple principle, the idea would be, okay, it reflects off of here, it gets turned to another dimension here, bounces off of this, bounces back again, bounces into this, okay, bounces back again, bounces into this. Now, if that kept happening, these two motions would add up to this vector. And if this one doesn't move, okay, I mean, it's not moving away on each one of these hits. It's just moving this way and this way. So with each hit, it just goes sideways. Then you can understand that, okay, we have motion in this direction, but we don't have any motion in this direction by the proton. The proton just ends up going back and forth. So I've converted two motions that have a vector in this direction into motion in two directions that will cancel each other, and there won't be any pull in this direction. So clearly the object, this entire object, would move in this direction. He says that's just not worth even considering. It's not worth even considering it. I mean, what can you say? I mean, they obviously are very hostile to what that's the scientific process, is to try different models and see if they work. Connect the dots in different ways and see if something comes out of the connections. That's what scientists love. They love to play with it, model it, and try to make it work. And this guy's just totally obnoxious to that. He says, I'm wasting my time and I'm wasting your time by even explaining a possible way that it could happen. And he says this possible way is just not even worth. It's really strained. Yeah. For some reason, he draws an object like cart and a force bit kind of lobbed into it. So it's kind of lobbed into it. No, it's kind of just directly stated that, that's the way it works. The energy goes in, it gets trapped inside between two electrons. That would be the real theory, that it's trapped between two electrons. And after that, it does some reason, bounces back and forth. Yeah, reflection it's called. Some bizarre reason that electrons would have a reflective force. So again, he doesn't get this simple analogy. You have ping pong paddles, and you have a ping pong ball that never loses any energy, a photon-like thing. And it hits one of the paddles, and is now trapped between the two paddles. You could just think that it was created in space, and there was a ping pong ball, and the paddles got moved closer to each other. What would happen to that ping pong ball? As the paddles get closer and closer, the ball bounces into the two surfaces more and more often. Well, if each time it hits the surface it's exactly the same amount of energy, so it doesn't matter whether the paddles are this far or this far, each impact on the surface is a bit of momentum. Obviously, I'm increasing the momentum, the force, as I bring the two things closer and closer, the force would get stronger and stronger, perfectly explaining why two electrons repel each other. He thinks that isn't worth considering. It's not even worth considering as a possible explanation for the repulsive force, the anti-gravity force. We can't understand why two things move away from each other. It's impossible to understand it as being a force that's actually trapped between the two objects. As I bring it closer, I increase the amount of force. So a simple analogy of just two ping pong balls, two paddles, and one ball bouncing between them, and the fact that I will, in fact, if I could make this experiment, if I could make a ball that doesn't decrease in its speed, that it would be a fact, okay, an undisputable fact, that the pressure would double as I double the proximity. As I move the paddles closer to each other, I'll double the amount of pressure being created by the ball. It's not even worth considering by this asshole's judgment. And these are people who think they're so much better than me and so much smarter than me and so much more have so much more integrity as human beings, and this is their fucking attitude. Amazing. And then they say, shit, I mean, our science is we have so much integrity, we're such great human beings, and we would never obscure the truth. And this is their behavior. And there's some reason why I would say, well, yeah, this is why physics sucks. This is why they got all these wrong answers. There's a bunch of assholes like this are running the world. Anyway. Okay, top. And after that, for some reason, bounces back and forth within the object. For some reason that's perfectly understandable, called reflection. And that somehow explains it for him. So again, he hasn't debunked it in any way except to say this, oh, only I could understand that. Only I can understand this ping pong ball analogy. It's completely beyond everybody else's. If I took it to a grammar school class, a 5th grade class, and I told them this crazy theory that if the ball was bouncing between two paddles and I brought the paddles closer together, the ball would bounce much faster, and if it had the same amount of energy each time it hit, that it would be double the pressure. If I said that to some 5th grade class, oh shit, they wouldn't get it at all. It's so crazy. Yes, it's amazing. Anyway, everywhere he denies it is the problem. Everywhere he denies it is the problem, or that maybe it is the problem, or it's just too small to measure. Okay, so he's saying it's too small to maybe it's too small to measure. I never made that argument. That's a De Hilster argument. I've always said the drag issue is a real issue. I mean, not always. I've always dealt with it, and that's the truth. That's why I came up with the explanations for it, is because I did deal with it. I did see it as a real problem that has to be explained. All right. Can't say he is wrong in that regard. So he thinks it's possible that it doesn't mean anything because somehow the small universe gets rid of it somehow. No, you do really have to explain it. It's a real force universe. And yes, if you're plowing into the force, you are going to hit more of it. Even if it was just light. Even if you just think of it as photons. The truth is, if I could make Einstein's theoretical half the speed of light spaceship, the truth is it would be blown to bits by the increase in energy, because it's moving into things like photons. It's turning soft X-rays into hard X-rays. It's turning grains of sand into bullets going half the speed of light. A grain of sand going half the speed of light is a bullet that could go through, like 10 miles of concrete. Okay, so obviously this theoretical spaceship is doomed. That you can understand. It's a real argument. Drag and the increases and decreases in the effectiveness of a force based on your motion is a real issue. I've given you 2 examples of how that real issue is negated, and you just pretend they don't exist. They're nothing. They're not even worth considering. All right, the effect on something like the Earth could be said to be too small to easily measure. Well, obviously I've argued that the Earth isn't affected by gravity or force. The elemental bits are. Gravity is a nuclear force. Gravity is moving electrons and protons. Gravity does not move the Earth. Gravity moves the little tiny bits inside of the Earth. They're the only things that really are moving. The only universe is the small universe. Go ahead, argue that the big universe is the real universe. Go ahead and make your argument that something moves because the little bits didn't tell it to. No, I'm arguing exactly the opposite. Gravity is a nuclear force. Nothing happens unless you affect the electrons and the protons. They're the things that are being affected by forces. They're the things that are deciding what everything else looks like. The small universe is the only universe. Anyway, could be said to be too small. So obviously it wouldn't be too small because the atoms are still the atoms. You can't undo the real mass of the Earth, and so it will be dragged just as much as an atom will be dragged, just as much as an electron will be dragged over time, and may still be there. Anyway, I thought the drag argument was a rather convincing one. So he's convinced that drag can't be overcome, that there's no mechanism built into atomic structure that makes it possible for there to be a conversion of motion from one dimension into another dimension, and therefore negating the balance that would exist. And therefore something could move against a force because it's negating the effectiveness of the force in the dimension it's moving. It doesn't change the vector because the equal and opposite reaction is happening in the other two dimensions. All right, there is a short video where Feynman describes it, so that's amazing, right? It's a long video, actually. It's an hour video, but yes, there's a short clip where he dismisses, even though he says mock gravity works perfectly and answers all the questions, it's got a problem, drag, so it can't work, it doesn't work. So even though it does everything else, makes gravity perfectly understandable, we have to throw it away because when you're running in the rain, you hit more rain forward than behind you. And because of that reason, we're done. We're not even going to talk about it anymore. We'll throw it in the garbage. That's exactly why physics sucks, is because it's that dismissive. If it doesn't look like what we want it to be, we ignore it. If the answer looks like we might have to think about it a little bit, forget it. And Feynman was a perfect example because he was the ultimate giver-upper. I'm really smart. I can't figure it out. Therefore, it can't be figured out. That's his attitude. All right. And Einstein was exactly the opposite. He was quite dissatisfied with the wooey answers, and he knew there had to be a better answer, and he went to his deathbed seeking it. Anyway, Feynman describes it specifically addressing the path model of gravity, the push model of gravity. Yeah, and again, he's dismissing it with a silly analogy, okay, that's so distant from what we know nuclear energy is doing. Nuclear forces are doing. So using raindrops as an analogy for electrons and protons, I'd say that's pretty dangerous. All right, so Farley says he has addressed several times offering different incoherent explanations. So they're incoherent explanations. I don't think they're incoherent. I think they're well within the realm of how we understand the geometry of motion in the universe. The drag argument could be mitigated by addressing particles moving much faster than the speed of light. Well, that would be just silly. So no evidence of that, and so that one's not going to work. But then you have the thermodynamic problem. Exactly. So what's the point? Particles don't have to move faster than light to overcome drag. Of course, all that is way over Gary's pay grade. So somehow he's saying, I don't understand that why, as he just stated, increasing the speed of particles isn't going to be a solution. All right, anyway, so to speak. So he goes with it's a stupid raindrop analogy. I go with, analogies are really great, but they can go way too far. And if you don't understand how they can go way too far, then you're pretty stupid. I think my analogy is pretty safe. Ping pong battles, ping pong ball, good analogy. Pretty safe. as if his entire channel and internet career isn't predicated on arguing by analogy. As I stated, I think analogies are very valuable. There was some other comment by some douche. Oh, Pirro did it first, so this is funny. I believe you are the first one to analyze his paper so far. So this is another where no point's quite useless. I usually they do note each that far. They stop at the photon or whatever. So anyway, so Superhuman Dance has done no analysis. All he said was unfalsifiable, unfalsifiable, unfalsifiable. He made no argument. And again, the hypocrisy of you people denying the fact that most of your physics is unfalsifiable. Most of your causes are unfalsifiable magic. They're all fields, forces, instruments that cannot be detected. They're all invisible by their very nature. There's no way to ever say there's no bent space or there's no ESP. There's no way to prove there isn't. Okay, so they're terrible theories. I don't know where Pirro did anything, so that's almost laughable that Pirro made anything called an argument somewhere. All Pirro did was the same thing you did, which is present the terrible wave tank experiment as that's what real slits do in water, when you know they really don't. That's not their natural condition. It's not the natural function. You have to force it to make those noises. And so you're just such a dishonest, lying sack of shit. Alright, so anyway, enough of the video. It's probably 2 hours. Anyway, till the next time. And such.